right, we're back talking New England Patriots football on Pat's Probe on the Our-Lads Football Network, as the New England Patriots are fresh off a tough defeat against their division rivals, the Buffalo Bills, 2 in a row now, Evan. So the Jags on the schedule, which we knew would be a healthy kind of
punching
rebound.
bag.
Yeah, there's a lot of other different ways we could. But look, Houston beat Jacksonville. Houston beat the Chargers last week, and
right.
You never know. The interesting thing about this matchup, though, is you got the 2 rookie quarterbacks going up against each other.
Yeah, I also think just looking over the last couple of weeks, this Jaguars defense played Davis Mills 2 weeks ago and then played Zach Wilson last week. And although Wilson beat them with his legs and had some big runs in that game on the ground as a scrambler, he only threw for 100 yards in the game, right? And 4 yards per attempt over the last 2 weeks against 2 rookie quarterbacks. This Jaguars defense has only given up 306 yards through the air combined between Davis Mills and Zach Wilson. So in a lot of ways, this matchup, to get any sort of juice out of it, is going to be pegged as Lawrence versus Mac and see how that matchup shakes out. But I also am interested to see how Mac looks against the Jaguars defense that has not been very good this year. They're 31st in DVOA. They're not a very good defense, but they are a defense that has played okay, respectable football against 2 young quarterbacks over the last couple of weeks. And certainly the way that Mac has played coming off this bye week, I'm not going to sit here and say that Mac Jones is light years ahead of Davis Mills and Zach Wilson based off what we've seen just recently. Obviously, the whole body of work, he's been definitely a better rookie quarterback than those 2 guys have been. But over the last couple of weeks, we haven't really seen Mac Jones, because remember, before the bye, they played Buffalo and he threw the ball 3 times.
Sure.
So we haven't really seen Mac Jones look good in a game in over a month now. So
what do you think the reason of that is? I mean, obviously you've watched every snap.
Yeah.
Every player goes through ups and downs over a long season, just like teams do. Throw in the fact that he's a rookie. So is there something that you're noticing in his game that just seems to be off, or do you just think, look, he's a rookie, that these things are going to happen?
Yeah, I definitely think that the bigger picture answer to the question is certainly the ebbs and flows of a rookie season. And I think when you look at some of the things that are going on with the pass catchers around him as well, Nelson Agholor out last week due to a concussion. He wasn't at practice again on Wednesday. Kendrick Bourne comes off the COVID list on Saturday, the day before the game, didn't practice all week with the team. So those are 2 of his best wide receivers. And in Agholor's case, he's their field stretcher. Whether he's put up big numbers in that role or not, he's the guy that gets the safeties deep and gets the safeties off of those middle of the field routes. And I think when I watched that tape back against Buffalo in particular, the condensed area that the Patriots were trying to attack in the passing game, that really stood out to me the most out of everything. And I think that that's where my concern level right now with Mac, I would say, is as high as it's been all year in terms of his performance, because he is threatening so little of the field right now. And pretty much everybody knows that they're going to try to throw the ball between the numbers. They're going to try to layer routes between the numbers and allow his quick release and his accuracy and his timing and all that type of stuff take over, because he doesn't have this unique arm talent like a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes. So defenses are starting to key on that. And as you would expect, when you face a good pass defense like Buffalo, who we have to keep in context is probably the best pass defense in the NFL, even without Tre'Davious White, they played a lot of inside leverage. So they're sitting their corners on the inside hip of these receivers, and they're daring Mac Jones and Jacoby Myers to beat them outside the numbers. If you're going to run a corner, you're going to run an outbreaking route, you're going to run something towards the sideline, and Mac is going to make a far hash throw coming across his body all the way out there, and he's going to beat us living on the boundary, then we're going to tip our caps and say, good throw. The Patriots don't have that in their bag right now, not only because Mac Jones doesn't have this arm cannon, but also because they don't have a receiver who consistently wins outside the numbers on a high level, especially without Nelson Agholor in the lineup, who's probably the only guy that can do that on a somewhat respectable level consistently. So I think that that's the problem, the concern that you have watching this Patriots passing offense is that they live in a 20-yard box in the middle of the field, right? We're basically between the numbers, and you put 20 yards on top of that. That's where they are right now. And the deep balls are fades, downfield throws where Mac is basically throwing these pop flies to N'Keal Harry and some of the other receivers and hoping that they can go and win a contested catch. It's not like guys are wide open down the field and he's throwing the ball to Tyreek Hill behind the defense. He's trying to force it into single coverage and let guys go ahead and make plays on the ball in the air. And those are right now the Patriots' explosive plays. Let's throw a ball up to 6'3" N'Keal Harry like they did against Indianapolis, and let's see if he can come down with it. Because there are no throws at that 20 to 25 yard range where Mac is driving the football through the air and being able to pinpoint it into a tight window beyond 10, 15 yards. Because he just doesn't have right now. He doesn't have the velocity for it. And I think that these better defenses like the Colts and like the Bills have recognized that on tape and say, well, he's not going to beat us out here. He's not going to beat us past 20 yards. We got to cover the inside and cover the 20 yards closer to the line of scrimmage. And I think that they're recognizing that, and they're recognizing that this Patriots offense is limited down the field. There just really isn't much of a threat, especially without Aguilar. And I think that that's really what's coming to all of it, is that they are forcing Mac Jones to beat them into tight passing windows, and he doesn't necessarily have the arm yet to be able to go ahead and fit the football into those tight windows coming across the middle of the field.
Well, this is the reason why the game is so important on Sunday, because this isn't Buffalo. This isn't Indianapolis. This isn't even Miami coming next week, who's on a charge and has the type of defense that will really pressure rookie quarterbacks into making mistakes. So this is the opportunity for him to get something positive going again, because even if they win, it's important that he does get some confidence back, because you don't want to have this continue going into Miami. And not to say that they can't be clinched by then, but still, a couple of weeks ago, the Patriots are sitting atop the conference.
Right.
And now it's about, are we going to be the 6th or 7th seed? And the better seed you are is going to help you in some way, shape, or form. But more importantly, the kid just has to have some confidence, because in the playoffs, he's going to face a good defense.
Yeah, I think the season that everybody always turns back to with the Patriots, and this team is not that team, but just as a comparison, everybody always looks at that 2018 Patriots team when things don't go well at the end of the year. They lost back-to-back games against Pittsburgh and in the Miami Miracle game in Miami the following week. And then they won 2 straight against a Buffalo team that obviously is not the team that we know of right now, and the Jets in week 17. They beat up on those 2 teams. They built some confidence. They found their identity, and they rediscovered their identity as an offense, and they went on a run, and they won the Super Bowl, right? And that's always what you look at. I think in these last 2 weeks, especially with the Jaguars game, this is a perfect time for the Patriots to, like you said, to build some confidence, to run their offense and get guys open again down the field after they were wearing coverage against Buffalo, and be able to hit some throws down the field that give Max some juice. And I look at this game, and just to look at this team and not go back in the past, that week 7 game against the Jets. That's when the 7-game winning streak started. The Patriots beat the Jets, what was it, 50-10 or something like that in Foxborough. And you could just tell that even though all of us in the media and on the outside say, oh yeah, but it was the Jets, you could tell in the locker room, the coaching staff, that they built some confidence in that game in themselves, that they said, okay, we started 2-4. We had some close losses against Tampa Bay and Dallas, some good teams in that 2-4 start, and then we can still beat the bag out of a team like New York. So we're better than the Jets. We're better than those bottom feeder teams. We're better than our record suggests, and they started believing again in themselves, and they rattle off 7 straight wins. So there is a lot of examples from recent Patriots history where you can say if they have another performance where they beat the Jaguars 50-3, then maybe they can build some of that similar confidence. Sure. Now, if they play a game, they have to beat the Jaguars by multiple touchdowns for people to feel good about this team going forward. If they beat the Jaguars by 10 points and it's a late touchdown in the fourth quarter that puts the game out of reach, then they're not really sending that message, right? But if they beat the bag out of the Jags, then I think that you start to talk about, okay, can this be a stepping stone for when they play better teams? And then if they go down to Miami in week 18 and win that game, it's a very hard game, right? It's Brian Flores. It's a good defense. The Miami's playing good football. They're probably going to have playoff implications as well. The Patriots don't play well down in Miami notoriously. It's a hard game to win. So if you can beat the doors off the Jags and then actually get a W in Miami, I think that would go a long way to whoever they play in the wild card round to being able to have some confidence and go into that game with something to speak of.
What happened? Let's talk a little bit about last week. What happened in the matchup? Were you disappointed in anything regarding strategy, or because you were confident that the team could beat Buffalo? The weather was obviously not a factor, but was there something in the game and the strategy at all where you said, I wasn't expecting this? I thought they were going to win this game because I thought this was going to happen and not that. Or was it just that Buffalo played better than you thought that they were going to play? Because we had talked to Ryan Talbot last week, and he even though we've seen these late runs by these playoff Super Bowl contending type teams, he didn't really feel confident that Buffalo could do that, even though there's still three games left as of that time, because they hadn't showed that ability yet.
Yeah.
Yet, it's interesting in the NFL, it seemed like Buffalo played their best game of the season in my mind. They didn't really make a lot of stupid mistakes that may have played earlier in the season. So it can happen. You can, turn the switch on if you have a good supporting cast, good coaching staff, and so forth and so on. But for the Patriots' sake, besides the Bills playing a really good football game, was there something strategy-wise or overall that you were surprised at? The reason why the Patriots not only didn't win the game, but really weren't in the game as much as the score might have indicated in the second half.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think watching it live and watching Isaiah McKenzie go across the field on those crossing routes against Miles Bryant and beat the Patriots like he did, 11 catches, 125 yards. Watching it live, I was going crazy thinking, how have they not adjusted to this yet? Right? How have they not done something different to this? Isaiah McKenzie, it's not like Stephon Diggs was going out there and torching them, right? It was McKenzie. And when I watched the tape back, I think the most frustrating part about it is that the Patriots did try to make some adjustments, right? They did try to cut off some of the crossing routes coming over the middle. They did try to use their safeties, whether it was in robber rolls or just coming down from a too high shell and cutting off the crosser from the other side, doing things that you do to try to shut down crossing routes. The one thing I think that was from a game plan, I don't know if it was game plan, I don't know if it was poor player execution, but the one thing that you always talk about with the Patriots, whether they're in zone coverage or they're in man-to-man and they have roamers in the middle of the field, rats, robbers, whatever you want to call it, they love to redirect and jam crossing routes. If you run a low crosser against the Patriots, it used to be that Dante Hightower would come up and he would take that crosser and he would crack him into next Tuesday. And he would say, no, you're not going to just come over the middle of the field here. Okay. The softness in which they played with defensively on the line of scrimmage, they have guys like Matthew Judon who was just out of it the entire game. And then the next day he gets put on the COVID list. So I wonder if he was already feeling under the weather on Sunday and that contributed to some of it. But there was one play in particular where Adrian Phillips has to run across the field with Dawson Knox on third down, and Matthew Judon is standing over Dawson Knox on the line of scrimmage as a pass rusher, and he just lets Dawson Knox go right by him. Doesn't even touch him, right? Doesn't jam him, doesn't hold him up, doesn't do anything. And if you're playing outside leverage man-to-man, and they're running these crossing routes away from you, and they're breaking away from the DBs, and nobody in the middle of the field is making them pay at the release, then they're going to get into these free releases and they're going to burn you going across the field. McKenzie is a return specialist. He runs a 4.3, 4.4 in the 40-yard dash. And I think a lot of people look back at this game and they said, this is the game where the Patriots really missed Jonathan Jones, who is their typical slot corner that would be where Miles Bryant was for most of this game. And maybe Jonathan Jones makes a heroic play at some point on Isaiah McKenzie, a diving pass breakup or something like that. But I don't think it would have mattered, honestly, if it was Jonathan Jones, because they're running McKenzie on these crossers. Miles Bryant's got outside leverage, and he's getting free releases at the line of scrimmage. And if you give these fast NFL receivers these free releases and you're not jamming them, you're not getting up in their faces. Next Gen had a really good stat about it. On the routes that McKenzie ran against Miles Bryant was giving him 4.6 yards of cushion every single time. So he's off the line of scrimmage on him. So there's no jam from the man coverage defender. There's no resistance from the linebacker level redirecting or holding up those crossing routes. So you're asking Miles Bryant to win a sprint across the field against the guy that he's out-positioned by or out-leveraged by. So I think that was the biggest thing looking back on the game was it wasn't necessarily the guys that were in primary man coverage on Isaiah McKenzie or on Dawson Knox on that one play that I mentioned with Judon. It was everybody else not doing their 111th. And I think that's when I watched this game back, tip your cap to Josh Allen. He played a fantastic game. This is the best game I've ever seen Josh Allen play.
Yeah, I watched pinpoint accuracy. Yeah,
yeah. I've watched a ton of Josh Allen tape over the years. Previewing matchups, post game match, all 22 stuff and all that kind of crap. We watched all of it. The best game he's ever played because not only was his accuracy and his timing impeccable going over the middle of the field, but he also didn't force anything down the field. He didn't have that WTF Josh Allen throw. Like where are you going with this ball right now? The arm punts to JC Jackson and Devin McCourty that we've seen in the past on the interceptions. He didn't have any of those types of plays. So tip of your cap to Josh Allen. We also made some fantastic out of structure, scramble around, flip the ball.
Including the one on fourth down.
Yeah, just some ridiculous athletic plays that. And I think if you're a Patriot fan, as frustrating as that game was, and as frustrating as that they gave the division away in that game is, you can hold some solace in the fact that more than likely, that was probably the best quarterback game the Patriots are going to face all year long.
Sure.
I can't imagine. Maybe Mahomes can play better than that, but I can't imagine that another quarterback the Patriots run into in the playoffs is going to play better than Josh Allen did on Sunday. That was probably the best game that any quarterback will play against them all year long. But I also look at it and say, I have never seen a Patriots defense look so lost and so disjointed as they did on Sunday. Just guys not doing their jobs. And that's always what Bill Belichick preaches. As soon as Josh Allen broke the pocket and he started scrambling around, guys are swarming to him and vacating their coverage responsibilities. And all Allen was doing was buying time, backing up and buying time, and then flipping the ball behind those linebackers that are come screaming up just because, oh no, can't let Josh Allen run. Well, what about the guy behind you that you just left in coverage, So guys not rerouting or jamming receivers, guys getting pulled out of their coverage responsibilities just because they're so afraid of Josh Allen scrambling. Just so much. Everybody out on the field honestly looked like a mercenary on Sunday, where everybody was out for their own gain, right? And everybody is playing the game in their own phone booth and not being aware of what the situation and what was around them. And I think that is the most troubling thing in some ways, because Bill Belichick's teams and his defenses are always so together and so as one on a string. And in this game, they were just not on a string. I mean, I can't tell you how many times Allen broke the pocket moving to his left or right, and here comes the linebacker out of the low zone in the middle of the field screaming up, and all of a sudden Allen's just throwing the ball right to where that guy came from, right?
Was it a talent thing? Do you notice anything regarding this particular bunch?
No, I mean, look, I think that you can point to a guy like Miles Bryant and say does he have the tools to stick with some of these slot receivers and some of these speedy guys in man coverage? Maybe not. Maybe they have to hide Miles Bryant a little bit better than they did when they faced Isaiah McKenzie. But like Steve Belichick put it to us yesterday, Buffalo threw the ball 50 times. So Josh Allen's got to throw the ball somewhere. If he's going to throw it 50 times, the ball's going to go to somebody. So whether it's Isaiah McKenzie or it's Stephon Diggs or it's Dawson Knox or whoever, somebody was going to get targeted a lot. And it just happened in that game that it happened to be McKenzie. So like I said, in a lot of ways, you got to look at it and say, this was an elite quarterback game by Josh Allen. Not many guys can replicate, especially when you start to look at some of the throws under pressure and some of the scramble plays and stuff like that he made. Not a lot of guys can replicate that in the league, and you have to tip your cap. But in other ways, they were completely disjointed, and they were completely scrambled, and they allowed the game to become chaotic. And I think
you mentioned that you thought they did make some changes in the second half.
Yeah.
What did they do in the second half that was positive, or what did you notice that they tried to do that just didn't work anyway?
Well, what they tried to do is they tried to cut off McKenzie a couple of times on the crossing routes with the safeties. But, what happened is that, so for instance, on that third down play, 3rd and 10, 7 minutes to go, the Patriots just make it 26-21. They get a stop here. They have a chance to take the lead with their offense back on the field. And they hit Isaiah McKenzie on the 17th crosser that they hit him to in the game for a first down. And I went back and watched the play on the tape, and watching it live, I was like, oh my, how did you not help to McKenzie? Like, of course that's where they're going to go with the ball. And they actually played a one cut or a one cross coverage where the safety, Devin McCourty, rotates into the crosser window. But the problem was that the Bills sent 2 crossers in the same direction across the field. So McCourty helped to Stephon Diggs, and he closed off Diggs's crosser, but they didn't have the help defenders to close off both guys. So in that particular play, that, and give credit to Brian Dable, right? Sure. He called a nice play. He schemed them up well. That's what Dante Hightower said this morning, and I think it's as easy of a cop-out as that is for the Patriots players who didn't execute on Sunday. Brian Dable schemed them up well in third down situations. He knew crossing routes were going to be a problem. He knew that they were going to probably have one hole player or rat defender in the middle of the field to sit in one of the crossing windows. But if they intersected the crossers or they sent 2 crossers in the same direction, then the rat defender can only help one guy. He can't help to both people. So in certain instances, they helped a guy like McKenzie. They closed off the field to McKenzie. Devin McCourty stepped up and took away that crosser. Well, here comes Dawson Knox in the other direction on a crosser, and there's nobody to help that guy. So those are the types of conflicts that they put the Patriots in. It was a great game plan. I think the other frustrating part about it is that every single time the Patriots get beat and their defense looks washed, just they can't stop anything, right? They give up 7 red zone drives. I bring back to Super Bowl, was it 52 against the Eagles, games like that where they just get torched defensively. It's always the same game plan. It's always the same game plan. The Patriots are playing cover one man free. They have the single high safety. They rotate the other safety into the box as a robber, and they're running crossing routes. They're running slants. They're running things to the middle of the field against out-leveraged corners, and you always just see the Patriots corners sprinting, trying to catch up to these in-breaking routes. And especially when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen who can really whip it, you just can't catch up. It's just impossible to catch up when the guy is throwing the ball 100 miles an hour on top of everything else. So it's frustrating as a fan, as a media personality to watch them. Really, though, that's the only game plan that gives them problems. What is those slants? The slant.
Well, don't you think that every team should come up with that game plan then? When you would play the Patriots.
So. You would think so, but it's, I guess, on some levels it's easier said than done, right?
You have to have the personnel.
Yeah, you have to have the personnel. You have to have the quarterback with the accuracy throwing over the middle of the field. And then also, like I said, you have to make some plays against the Patriots that are otherworldly to beat the Pats. And that's the funny thing about this game, was that it was 26-21 in the fourth quarter.
Yes.
And the Patriots, for as poorly as they played, and
there was that they had their was that the same drive with Jackson missed the interception?
Yes. So Jackson missed the interception on first down. Second down, they pressure Josh Allen and they get him to throw the ball away. Now it's 3rd and 10, and they hit another crosser to McKenzie, and then the rest of the drive.
Yeah, that was the game right there when Jackson couldn't come down with the interception. Because if he comes down with that interception, Patriots are going to score a touchdown.
Yeah, so they have their window of opportunity even in a game where they didn't play well. And I would say the same thing against Indianapolis in the fourth quarter. They had a window of opportunity right before Jonathan Taylor broke off that big run to still be in the game and still be competitive towards the end. So it's amazing to me when I watch Bill Belichick's teams, especially the ones that have some roster talent like this one, not necessarily the team last year, but the team this year and teams that with Brady, that they can play terribly for a half. They can play terribly for 3 quarters. And then you always look up in the fourth quarter and it's a 1-score game. It's incredible how they still, because I can sit there and I can have a laundry list of things that have gone wrong in the first 2.5, 3 quarters. And because of Belichick's wizardry, you always look up in the fourth quarter and the Patriots have the ball in a 1-score game. And you're like, how did this happen? Right? I mean, how did we get here?
Yeah.
And looking at all their losses this year, none of them have been huge blowouts, right? And they haven't really been run off the field by anybody. Dallas, they lose in overtime. Tampa Bay, they doink a field goal at the end of the game and lose by 3 points. Miami in week 1, 1-score game. New Orleans, they lost by 2 touchdowns, but it was a 1-score game in the fourth quarter again, and the defense gave up a drive. So it's incredible how they always seem to pull it together, that they're at least give themselves a chance to win these games at the end of the game. So
especially how crazy and chaotic the new schedule is, and everything that's been going on over the last few weeks, and Buffalo losing to Jacksonville and Chargers losing to Houston. You've avoided that loss so far. There's one more opponent that could possibly do that to the Patriots, and that's on Sunday.
Right.
And if you don't have that loss, then that's a win, because again, those teams have found a way to beat teams that nobody think is going to happen. And like you said, the blowout, that hasn't happened either. And even Tampa Bay gets shut out. Where did that come from? So there hasn't been that one game where you just look at it as a Patriot fan, you're just disgusted about what happened.
Yeah, no, you don't. And I think as much as you want to kill them for this 2-game skid, and they didn't play well enough against Indianapolis or Buffalo to win the game. That's what Bill Belichick said after both games. And like you just said against Buffalo, even though it was close in the fourth quarter for a time, it never felt like the Patriots had any sort of chance in the football game. And I would say the same thing about the Colts game to a degree as well. But at the same time, in those 2 games, Indianapolis blocks a punt and returns it for a touchdown. Sure. That was probably the biggest play in the game against the Colts, especially with the way that it ended up working out. 2 running style type of teams and low scoring and for the most part and stuff like that. And then against Buffalo, Josh Allen goes berserk, right? And really takes over the game and is the best player on the field for either team. And if those 2 things don't happen at the same time in back-to-back weeks, then I think we're talking and looking at this team very differently. So credit to Allen. I didn't think he had that in him, honestly. I knew he had it in him against worse teams, right? Against some of the dreads of the league. I didn't expect him to play like that against Bill Belichick. But the one thing I always point to with this game and all of our reactions and stuff like that to it is that the Patriots allowed Josh Allen to make the game chaotic, right? They allowed Josh Allen to make the game about my athleticism and my arm strength and my physical ability against yours. And they didn't play a structured game plan defensively where everybody was in the right spots and everybody was staying home where they were supposed to be staying home. And they allowed it to become a playground football game. And when you allow that to happen against a guy as talented as Allen or a guy like Patrick Mahomes or someone like that that's as physically gifted as those 2 players are, I would even throw a Justin Herbert in that conversation or in those guys too. That's how you get yourself beat and beat badly, is when you allow him to make it about how it used to be when we were on the playground when we were kids and we would play tackle football with our friends and the best athlete would always win, right? That's how that game looked like on Sunday, and the Patriots can't let that happen. They can't let that Allen dictate the terms like that, and they have to play with their head on their shoulders a little bit tighter and more structured the next time around if they do play a team like Buffalo or Kansas City or another team that has a gifted quarterback like that.
Yeah, because right now, I think if the season ended today, they would play the Bengals.
Yes.
And they have an exciting young quarterback, but he's never been in a playoff game before. So
he's never been in and he's never played Bill Belichick.
And that's not a good thing. No.
If I was a Bengals fan, I would be very worried about drawing the Patriots in the first round for that reason. I think the Bengals are playing better football right now than the Patriots are, certainly. But yeah, going up against Belichick in your first ever playoff game with a defense that at least has the pieces to execute a game plan and has executed a lot of game plans well this year, I don't know if that is really the matchup I would want if I was Cincinnati.
So right now, the chances are that Buffalo will win the division based on their opponents.
Yes.
So what's the best case scenario for the Patriots as far as the seeding is concerned?
I think the best case scenario is now to play the matchup, right? In terms of who you're going to play and why you're going to play on Wild Card Weekend, right? Obviously, you're not going to get the number 1 seed. You're probably going to play on the road because you're not going to win your division. But I think that there are some matchups like we just talked about. Cincinnati is a great matchup for the Patriots in the first round because of the young quarterback.
Would you say any AFC North champ?
Yeah, I would say that they would play pretty well against, like, if Baltimore ends up winning that division. Lamar in that passing game, it's limited. It's a team that, if you take away the run and really force Lamar to beat you from the pocket, then you're probably going to have a pretty good chance against. I've talked about this before. That Patriots team last year beat Lamar in Baltimore, not in Baltimore, but in Baltimore last year without Dante Hightower and without a lot of their pieces on defense and with a lot of young guys playing in that COVID season. So they still beat them last year with a lot of faces that are no longer on the team because they were not good players for the Patriots a year ago. So I think Baltimore is a good one to play. The team that you're trying to avoid at all costs is Tennessee, right? You don't want to play Tennessee. That's a team that I think matches up extremely well against the Patriots. I would, for the entertainment value, I think it would be great to play Buffalo again, just because it's a grudge match. It's the third game in a season against the same team, but.
And that's a winnable game because remember we talked about it last week, and it happened again. The Bills play the Patriots better in Foxborough. It's for whatever reason, they just seem to play better against the Patriots in Foxborough. So, if they play the Bills again, it's going to be in Buffalo, and why not? It's probably a good matchup for the Patriots.
You would like to think that the Patriots learn from this past game against Josh Allen and have a much different game plan and execute much differently in terms of what they're doing defensively. So is Josh Allen and the Bills, I'm not saying that they can't beat the Patriots, but will they beat the Patriots with the exact same game plan they just beat the Patriots with on Sunday? Probably not, right? You're probably going to have to do something else against Belichick to beat him a second time in the same season. So, yeah, I would love it just from the entertainment perspective. I think this rivalry between the Patriots and the Bills is starting to really brew. And we talked about this, I think, on the last show, maybe with Ryan or the show before that. There hasn't been a time really in NFL history where the Bills and the Patriots have both been competitive at the same time, right? In the 90s, the Patriots had their moments with Drew Bledsoe, obviously getting to a Super Bowl against Green Bay, but the 90s were really the Bills in the AFC, right? They make 4 Super Bowls. I know they didn't win any of them, but they make 4 of them. So they were really the team in the 90s. And then in the 2000s and the 2010s, obviously Brady's here and the Patriots are a wagon. And Brady, I think, was something like 36-3 in his career against Buffalo with the Patriots. I mean, it was incredibly bad for the Bills. I mean, they got destroyed in every game pretty much that they played against Brady during that era. So there isn't really a time in NFL history where both teams are good at the same time. And now it seems like these two teams are pretty darn even, right? I think Buffalo proved on Sunday that they're the better football team, certainly when the weather and all things are equal, right? And they're playing on an equal playing field, at least. But you have Allen, you have Mac, you have 2 young quarterbacks that are going to be around for a while. So I think this has the makings of a really good long-term divisional rivalry that I don't think the Patriots have ever really had under Bill Belichick. You know, the other teams just really haven't risen to that occasion. The Dolphins early on with Taylor and Ricky Williams and those players, they were a little bit like that, I guess, but it never really rose to the Patriots' rival in the 2000s was Peyton Manning and the Colts,
Sure.
right? That was their team to go up against. Rex Ryan's Jets were frisky, obviously,
Couple of
against
years,
New England, yeah, as well, but they've never really had a consistent rival that could play up to their level in the division, and now it feels like Buffalo has gotten there.
Well, we'll see how long, and with 2 young quarterbacks, it could last, no question.
Right.
You would think it will last, and maybe a playoff matchup is exactly what it needs to amp up a true rivalry.
Well, the hatred from the Buffalo side has always been there because we've been the big brother that have beaten them up all these.
Yeah, that doesn't count though. Yeah.
Right. That they always have hated the Patriots. I think Patriots fans have always kind of laughed at Buffalo and made fun as the big brother. And now that it's a little bit more even, I think the intensity from both fan bases is starting to really grow. So that it's fun. You know, it's been a while.
And as far as Jacksonville again, and by the way, the offense, because you didn't talk about the offense, because again, we saw the team run down and control the game the first time against Buffalo. It wasn't like they had 300 yards rushing, but they had the big run, the one big run, and they controlled the game running the ball. Did they do something different, or did they, or was it just Buffalo doing something different? Was it the fact that the weather was nice, so the Patriots had to throw the football, and because Mac wasn't on top of his game, that's the reason New England's offense wasn't all that good? What was the disappointment about New England's offense?
They ran the ball extremely well again. Damian Harris had 3 touchdowns in this game and over 100 yards rushing. He had a huge game for your fantasy team as well. Huge game. So he really played extremely well. And the running game played extremely well. They averaged over 5 yards a carry, 50% success rate. I mean, they ran the ball very well. They got behind, and when you get behind in the scoreboard, you're not going to get back into the game solely running the football when you're down 10, 13 points.
So you don't think they didn't run it enough?
No, I don't think it wasn't that they didn't run it enough. I think that they weren't able to truly get into the game plan that they had scheduled for Buffalo. And Josh McDaniels said as much on Tuesday when we spoke to him, where he said, you come into a game and you have a scripted plays that you hope that you're going to be able to call during the game. And then you get down 17-7. And that script goes down the tubes, and you sort of have to open up your passing game at that point and try to get yourself back in the football game. And I think that's really what ended up hurting them the most, was that they had to go away from that balance, and they had to put the game more in Mac Jones's hands. And I don't think it's necessarily an indictment on Mac, that he can't throw against a very, very good elite Buffalo secondary.
That's
right?
The league.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic pass defense. So I don't think that's really an indictment on him. It's just not the way the Patriots want to play the Bills, right? It's just not the script that's going to go New England's way.
And it's also not the way that they're going to beat anybody, really, that's a playoff team. They have to run the football, and they have to play defense.
Yeah, if they don't get off to better starts, I mean, then maybe they can give up a touchdown early to Jacksonville and still win the game 45-7. But if they don't get off to better starts against playoff caliber teams like Miami in Week 18, or wherever they end up playing in the wild card round, assuming the non-doomsday scenarios, and they are able to clinch a wild card berth, if they don't play better early on in these games, and they don't get out to some leads, and they don't keep the game close early, and they start getting blown out. They were down 20-0 against Indianapolis, and then they were down 17-7 and 20-7 against Buffalo. And they cannot play like that with a rookie quarterback. You just can't play from behind with Mac Jones. And you also look at the other thing, not to put it all on Mac. The one thing that really stood out to me on the coach's tape was route spacing, and how condensed and on top of each other all the Patriots receivers were on so many different concepts. And it's not just the field stretching ability. I mean, they're running dig routes over the middle of the field, and guys are ending up in the same spot. Right. And guys are all on top of each other. There's no separation. There's no levels to the concepts. And when you're doing stuff like that, I mean, that's just bad football, right? It's just bad route running. It's bad football. There wasn't a whole lot of spacing. There wasn't a whole lot of separation in general for the Patriots receivers against Buffalo. And I think Mac could have played a better game. I thought there were some throws where he's a little bit tentative or gun shy throwing the ball down the field. There was the bad decision when he threw the ball into double coverage to N'Keal Harry in the end zone, and that ball was almost intercepted. His interception, I thought Klein, the linebacker, made a really good play on it to get in the passing lane, but that was one that ideally you would like to see him eat, right? Because Klein, when he gets to the top of the drop, Klein is already starting to change his direction and change his momentum from forward to backwards. So ideally you'd like to see him stick that in his back pocket and throw the ball away or try to find a different place to go with the football. So there's some decision-making stuff that I would say was a little bit questionable from Mac. But overall, I would say that was more of a system failure than a Mac Jones failure, where there just wasn't a whole lot of guys open. There wasn't guys running precise routes or running hard routes. There wasn't a lot of separation, and there wasn't a lot of spacing. And when you start to put those types of things together against a really good pass defense, you get the performance that you got on Sunday, where he completed 40% of his passes and was pretty much terrible statistically.
Yeah, free agency next year, definitely. And I say free agency because we've talked about the Patriots' failure to draft good receivers.
Yeah.
That free agency, they're going to have to pick up at least one bona fide starting caliber receiver.
Yeah.
Especially to help out Mac Jones.
Too, with that position with Mac is they need a receiver that is an explosive guy with the ball in his hands, right? Because he's not going to throw these deep throws like he's Allen or like he's Mahomes or Herbert or these guys. They don't want that in general in their offense, unless you have Randy Moss or Brandon Cooks. They really haven't been a deep passing offense in that way. They are an efficient move the sticks type of passing offense. But what they need is a guy that once he gets the ball in his hands, he can take off with it, right? And he
like
can
Elijah Moore.
Right. He can turn a 7-yard slant into a 20-yard slant, and he can turn a 10-yard slant into a 50-yard slant because he's just so athletic and explosive. And they need a guy that Mac can distribute the ball to with accuracy, with timing, lead him on the move and throw him open on the move and allow that guy to just go. Right. And they don't have the highest targeted receiver on their team, almost double the targets from everybody else, is Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers is not a yak guy, right? He's not an explosive receiver. He's not running away from anybody. So they need somebody, and you could go back to his Alabama days and watch Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle. They're special talents, right?
Yes.
But when you watch those two guys play at Alabama, it's a lot of Mac putting the ball on their chest and allowing them to just run away with it, right? And just take off on these runways on slant routes and things over the middle of the field. And you don't see a ton of the guy's, 10 yards behind the defense and Mac is throwing the ball 65 yards in the air. Like, you just don't see a ton of that.
Sure.
But what you see a ton of is those RPO concepts where they hit them quickly over the middle, and they had these receivers that could just burst out with them and explode out with them. And the Patriots just don't have that player. And I look at an offense and a quarterback that is similar in my mind, and why the Patriots, I think, liked Mac in the draft in general, is I think they see a lot stylistically of Jimmy G and Mac Jones, and the way that he can throw the middle of the field, process things quickly, get the ball out on time and accurately. But Jimmy G has Debo, right? And Debo averages almost 10 yards after the catch per catch. He leads the league in yards after the catch. So Jimmy has his guy, and George Kittle's a really good guy with the ball in his hands as well. So the Patriots need to find players that can create explosive plays on their own to a degree, and not just rely on Josh McDaniels to scheme up a wide open receiver down the field that Mac can hit, because that's not going to happen too often against these good pass defenses. So I look at that Z receiver role. I look at Jacoby Myers, and I say it's probably more important for the Patriots to upgrade that position in their offense, that slot Z guy, the Julian Edelman role, the Wes Welker role, to somebody that can create after the catch and be more explosive as a playmaker than it is for them to go out and get a big time outside receiver that can go out and win outside the numbers.
Well, it's interesting because the kid that he played with, Mechie at Alabama, who could be coming out.
Yeah.
He was supposed to be like their big guy this year.
Right.
Based on how well he played last year in 2020 with Mac. But with Devonta Smith gone and new quarterback, whatever the case may be. But all of a sudden, Mechie's production has just gone downhill.
Yeah.
But Jamison Williams has become now all of a sudden that guy you're talking about now.
Right.
So that's a guy that all of a sudden, who's this guy? He was behind. It was like getting three receptions for Ohio State last year.
Yeah.
The last time we saw him play.
The problem is that Jamison Williams is probably going to have like 400 yards in the college football playoff at some point.
And he'll be a first round top 10 pick.
Yeah. And he's going to run a 4.2 in the 40-yard dash at the combine. And a guy that right now on a lot of, because I trust me, I've looked at Jamison Williams. I've also looked at Dotson. I think he's from Penn State. I think it is. Yeah, he's a real burner. I've looked at those two guys, but with Jamison Williams, I said, this is exactly what they need. A guy that can take a 3-step slant 80 yards to the house at any time, as long as you hit him in stride with it. Perfect, right? That's exactly what they need. But yeah, he's going to end up running a ridiculous 40. He's like 6'1", 6'2", too. He's not like small.
He's not tiny. Nope.
No, he's a big dude. So those guys go top 10 all day, every single day. So
that's why I think Mechie might, be more reasonable, because he's a little smaller. He's not having the production this year, so he'll be a second round pick.
He's also injured. I think he tore his ACL.
Yeah,
so he's going to go day 2 probably, and the Patriots might look at it and say, oh, well, maybe they won't have him in 2022, but we could get fully healthy Mechie in 2023 and pair him at that point with Mac. But yeah, I think that those guys, if they're going to try to look in the draft, are good options. The guy that everybody up here is really hoping becomes a free agent is Chris Godwin, who's going to get paid gazillion dollars by somebody, whether it's Tampa Bay or somebody else in free agency. But he plays that Edelman role right now in Tampa Bay, that Z slot move type of role. And he would be obviously, he looks great with Brady and in a similar offense. So he's obviously going to be pretty good here. So just players that are just, they don't have that one guy. They don't have a guy. They don't have a dude. They have a bunch of options, right? They have a bunch of 2s and 3s. And there's something to be said for that, because if they add the guy on top of Hunter Henry and Kendrick Bourne and Jacoby Myers, then we're really cooking with gas. But they don't have a Devontae Adams. They don't have a DeAndre Hopkins. They don't have a Tyreek Hill. They don't have the dude. And until they find the dude, then this passing offense is going to have a ceiling. And it's not even just about Mac. It's just a ceiling in general because of the talent around him. So they have a stable offensive line that I think protects him relatively well most of the time. They have a bunch of good complementary receivers that can, if you put them in the right order, in the pecking order behind a dude, then you're in really good shape. But yeah, they got to find that number one guy. And I'm not usually in love with the receivers, right? I'm not usually the guy that's like in the fantasy football realm and is like, oh, they don't have, who am I drafting in the first round of my fantasy draft on the Patriots? Nobody. I don't usually care too much about all that kind of stuff, but it feels like this offense has filled all the other holes.
Yeah.
Right? They have running backs, they have line, they have other receivers that can be complementary guys, they have tight ends, but they don't have the dude. So at this point in time, whether it's a trade like the Bills traded for Stephon Diggs to give Josh Allen his guy.
True.
If it's a trade like that, if it's a free agent signing like Godwin, if it's a draft pick in the first round on a guy that they finally hit on at the wide receiver position, whatever the case may be, they need to find Max dude. And until they do that, then this passing offense is going to be capped.
Yeah, because it's funny. This is like typical New York with their criticisms. I was reading the last 24 hours about how, Jets, they have to find more weapons for Zach Wilson. It's like, okay, I think Mac Jones would love to have Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, and Jamison Crowder to throw to, and the Jets need more weapons at wide receiver. I mean, come on. So every team, what do you need? 4 or 5 skilled position receivers? They have enough skilled position receivers. They need other things.
Yeah,
so, I mean, but
that's
typical.
The difference is, and why they've been able to play so well with Mac in his rookie season is that he does have a lot of stability around him. He does have a good offensive line.
Yes.
He does have professional receivers that they brought in free agency like Henry and Bourne and Aguilar that do the right things and get to the right places and all that kind of stuff. But they, like I said, they don't have
it's a process. It was never going to happen all in one year.
Right. But I look at, Arizona trades for DeAndre Hopkins.
Sure.
Buffalo trades for Stephon Diggs.
That's the way to go if you're the Patriots.
Right. They are that move away.
Don't try to draft another receiver in the first round.
No, I don't know who the next disgruntled wide receiver is going to be.
How about Adams if Aaron Rodgers goes?
Yeah, they're going to have to pay him $30 million a year. I don't know.
Well, but you're going to pay Godwin, or so you got to pay somebody.
Yeah.
So,
but I look at those trades: the Hopkins trade, the Diggs trade.
Yep.
I don't want any part of like Odell Beckham and those retreads and stuff like that. But the next frustrated, disgruntled wide receiver that comes out and says, I want to trade. I don't love the idea of it because of his age, but even a guy like Allen Robinson in Chicago who can play inside, he can play outside, he can do some different things for the Patriots.
He'll be a free agent, won't he?
I don't know if he's a free agent, but he's obviously not going to stay.
Yeah, he's not going to. Yeah, it's
right. So a guy like Allen Robinson, a guy, whoever gets frustrated next, honestly, that's in that category of number one stud receiver, number one option in an offense. Right now, the Patriots' number one option in their offense is Jacoby Myers, and they cannot have that.
Yeah,
right. No. They just can't. So whoever is the next guy that comes available, that's in the Diggs, Hopkins, that sort of tier, the Patriots need to be the first one on the phone.
And maybe they will, yeah.
Right. There's no more excuses anymore to not be the first one on the phone for that type of guy, right?
What else is there? What is it, corner? Is that like or maybe
they could probably, depending
edge
on
rusher?
What they do with J.C. Jackson, right? He's a free agent at the end of the year. They're probably going to tag him. But depending on what they do with J.C. Jackson, corner is going to be in need. But Belichick can draft corners. He signed J.C. Jackson as an undrafted free agent, and he's a Pro Bowl.
He hits on those. Yeah.
Yeah, he can get corners. He can get pass rushers. He can get linemen. Those guys are not. That's not the problem. They can get backs, running backs. They have tight ends already. They have the 2 and the 3 in the receiving pecking order already. So when you look at this roster and you say, what's the number one need for the Patriots? At this point, it is the cherry on top. It's not putting together the whole team. They did a really good job of that last offseason, I feel like, of putting themselves in a position where they are probably truly, especially because they hit on the quarterback, at least so far, they are one piece away from being a true Super Bowl contender, and that cherry on the top is a bona fide stud receiver. We're really at that point with this team. People are going to talk about, I know when we get into the offseason, they're going to talk about corner. They're going to talk about linebacker. They're probably going to talk about left tackle with Isaiah Wynn. He's really been very good this year. Belichick can get those guys in the draft. Sure. He'll figure out those positions in the draft. The spot that they have a blind spot for and they need desperately is Max Devontae Adams, is Max Stephon Diggs, Max whoever, DeAndre Hopkins. Go out and get that guy.
Well, maybe Jerry Jeudy could start complaining that I'm not getting enough attention here in Denver.
Maybe it's one of his Bama boys like Jerry Jeudy that starts wanting out. I don't know. Jerry Jeudy hasn't proved to me yet that he's like a stud receiver in the NFL.
He's got no quarterback help though. He's got nothing.
That's fair. I want a guy that's Diggs,
already proven,
Hopkins, that's been there, done that in the prime of his career.
I just don't think there are many guys like that are available.
Right. Well, but that's the thing is that you wouldn't have thought that DeAndre Hopkins was to be available, or you wouldn't have thought that Diggs would be. These guys always get frustrated if they don't get their touches, if they don't put up their stats. Somebody's going to get annoyed somewhere, right? With the product, with the lack of winning. All these kinds of things that happen in the NFL, someone somewhere eventually is going to get fed up with his situation, and the Patriots have to be there to pounce and be the team that they can't get outbid again. If a guy like that comes available in a trade, they can't allow themselves to get outbid again because they were involved in some of these deals. Stephon Diggs, they were heavily involved in that trade, and they almost pulled off a trade for Stephon Diggs to keep Brady here. And they end up letting him go to Buffalo, right? And you can't get outbid.
Is Keenan Allen too old if he gets disgruntled in the offseason?
Yeah, I think Jacoby Myers is like a poor man's Keenan Allen, right? They are those shifty slot receiver types that run good routes and stuff like that. But Keenan Allen's just better, than Jacoby Myers is.
Getting up there in age, not over the hill yet, but he's getting up there.
Up there, a little bit injury prone at times. I don't know. I don't mind it. Obviously, it's better than nothing. Certainly. But yeah, look, this is why you wish so badly that they could find somebody in the draft, right? And they could have their own guy and build with that guy and have him under contract for 4 or 5 years and have him be young and not have to worry about all these other age, tread on the tires, all that kind of stuff. But the Patriots they can't draft them for some reason. So unless they hire somebody that knows how to draft them and make the decision for them, I don't know what other route you go.
Well, first of all, they have to beat Jacksonville. And even though they're a 15.5-point favorite, and it's a 7-1 on the money line, and I get where all that's coming from, but we've seen bigger upsets before this season. And a matter of fact, Jacksonville's upset against Buffalo was bigger. So, as a matter of fact, Jacksonville beat Miami and Buffalo this season.
Yeah, so, no, they can, look.
That's Urban Meyer.
Yeah, I don't know.
This is a different coaching staff, and Trevor Lawrence is a rookie quarterback.
I think Trevor Lawrence can have some wins against the Patriots defense. Some downs that he wins and some throws that he makes down the field. I would be shocked if they don't have multiple turnovers on Sunday. Yeah. And just the way that Belichick always schemes it up against rookie quarterbacks, he's able to spin
unless you're Davis Mills.
Unless you're Davis Mills. But you look at that Davis Mills game and you see a very similar game plan to what Buffalo just used to beat the Patriots, right? That's the blueprint. If you can execute that blueprint, then you can beat the Patriots defense and beat because you're not beating the personnel, you're beating the system, right?
Well, they have Marvin Jones and Shenault. Is Shenault healthy or not on COVID? Because I think he missed last week, didn't he?
Yeah, I don't know what his situation is.
They have a lot of guys on COVID.
They have like half their team right now is on the COVID list. But with these new rules, a lot of those guys probably should be able to come back.
Yeah. And they do have a good corner, and Shaq Griffin's having a nice season.
Yeah.
So
now their secondary the last 2 weeks, like I said, they have not played two young quarterbacks, Wilson and Mills, last 2 weeks, and those two guys have had trouble trying to throw the ball down the field against
the Patriots. All they have to do is run the football, and they should be fine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They'll probably run for 250, 300 yards on Sunday.
Yeah, they struggle to stop the run against the Jets, as you know. I mean, the Jets ran all over them. Not just Wilson scrambling. Michael Carter had a huge game on the ground, but the Jets run it differently than the Patriots. The Jets are a very zone blocking heavy team. The Patriots are power. We're going to run you over like bowling pins type of running game. So it doesn't really matter, though. I don't think that much. I think that the matchups are the matchups, right? And you can exploit them in similar ways, even if you get to it a little bit differently.
Look, it's the NFL. What you have to do more than anything is just like you were saying with the last couple of weeks is the Patriots, even against Jacksonville, you got to get off to a good start.
Yes.
What you don't want to do is get off to another slow start against a bad team that thinks they have a chance to beat you and upset you. Yeah, because they know they've done it already this year.
Are frustrating because against Indianapolis, it totally made sense. They're coming off the bye week. They're on the road. They're playing a good football team, and I still think even without Brady, that when they travel to Indy, I think that's their regular season Super Bowl in Indy is to beat the Patriots and beat Bill Belichick. They hate him from the Peyton days, right? There's a lot of Deflategate came up again.
Well, they had lost 7 straight before the win. Yeah,
right. Deflategate came up again during that week, right? The people in Indianapolis do not like the Patriots, so that the Colts were fired up for that game. And they also had, the bye week, and the Patriots were on that 7-game winning streak, maybe got a little bit complacent and read the press clippings a little bit too much. That game we can excuse. Getting down to Buffalo with the division on the line at home after you had the wake-up call the week before and coming out flat again and playing poorly again in the first half. That one I still can't wrap my head around how this team allowed that to happen 2 weeks in a row, especially given what was on the line last week against Buffalo.
Well, that's why they have to, because if they play the same disjointed kind of way that they played against the Bills, that's where you can get actually in a 4-quarter football game against a bad football team. So
yeah, right.
And obviously,
Lawrence, athletic guy with a big arm. He's not Josh Allen, but maybe in 3 or 4 years he might be Josh Allen, right? He's kind of young Josh Allen right now.
True.
So there's some, if you let Trevor Lawrence scramble around and throw the ball down the field against man coverage, I mean, I'm not saying they're going to do what Buffalo did, but I think he can make some plays. So you got to be careful, certainly.
But you're expecting the game over before the 4th.
Oh, it better be. It better be. Or look, on our shows, on Patriots Beat and stuff like that, if the Patriots play a competitive game against Jacksonville, meaning even if they win the game a little bit at the end, and like I said, and it reminds me like of that Tennessee game the Patriots won about a month and a half ago. That was a game for most of the game, right? The Patriots scored 2 touchdowns in the 4th quarter and made it a laugher late, but for the most part, the Titans battled them for 3.5 quarters of that game.
And they had a bunch of key guys out. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So if they play a game like that against Jacksonville, where it's really only a blowout with 2 minutes to go in the 4th quarter, we'll be talking about John Dotson and Jamison Williams and stuff like that on next week's show. I'm telling you now, because the Patriots won't go anywhere. If they can't beat the doors off of Jacksonville, they're not going anywhere.
Probably right. Well, we'll see what happens, and if they can correct the ship, it's Miami next week, and a positive.
Hate it. Yeah. Hate it.
Are you going down there?
I'm planning on it. COVID stuff right now is not good anywhere, but especially in Southern Florida, it's even worse. So I'm planning on going, yes, but we'll see. We'll take it day by day.
All right, and Miami is going to be in Tennessee, so they have a big game as well. To see if their winning streak
Patriots
comes to an end.
Can clinch a playoff berth this week with either a Raiders or Titans win, I believe it is, over the Dolphins and Baltimore, right? I think are the matchups. So
if New England wins?
If New England wins and Miami or Baltimore loses, then the Patriots will clinch a playoff spot this week.
All right. Well, we'll know next week. So in the meantime, you'll get a preview of the game on Friday.
Yeah, Thursday actually.
Thursday
week, with New Year's Eve. Yeah, so Thursday preview show on YouTube, Patriots Press Pass, and post game recap show on Sunday right after the game on Pat's Press Pass as well.
And we will be talking a lot about the draft when the season's over. So don't worry about that if you're into those sort of things. As a Jet fan, I get into, of course, around every October.
Yeah.
So hopefully that'll come to an end real soon. All right, Evan, appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds good, Greg.